I'm Caroline Fairchild, and joining me now in the studio is JetBlue Airways Chairman Joel Peterson. Joel, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you, Caroline.
So you have been called the Mr. Rogers of Silicon Valley by some press. How did you get that name?
So I gave a talk at Stanford, and there was a member of the press was there, and the movie on Fred Rogers had just come out. He said, "You remind me of Fred Rogers. Can I do an article on you?" So we did an article, and it came out that I was the Fred Rogers of Silicon Valley.
Right, and what he meant by that is that you have a lot of empathy in the way that you teach and the way that you lead, and we're having a period right now where there's a lot of backlash, particularly on Silicon Valley, for perhaps not leading with empathy. Why do you think about that, and how can we get tech to perhaps think more holistically about leadership?
Well, people are people, whether they're in Silicon Valley or New York or the Midwest, and people want to be respected members of winning teams doing something meaningful. And if you can do that as a leader, if you can help people do that, they're going to respond positively. Silicon Valley can be kind of cutthroat at times. Not everybody is, but sometimes they are. Anytime you have a lot of change in an industry, people can lose track of their values. And so I think he thought it was just unusual that he found a professor at Stanford who talked about values.
And a lot of what you call that cutthroat behavior drives from this place of needing to drive the bottom line and consider profits. So how can CEOs think more about than just the health of the business and think more about societal issues?
Well, CEOs need to be profitable over time, and they need to grow over time. But they can't build a strong culture unless they show respect for customers, show respect for employees, and show respect for shareholders. So they have to balance all of those things, make all things considered decisions that are wise over time. There's a lot of pressure. In Silicon Valley, in some ways, there's less pressure in the early days because you just have to, they measure success by eyeballs or hits or clicks, things like that. But ultimately, a business to succeed has to be profitable.
And a lot of your work at Stanford focuses on building trust through mentorship and other ways. How can leaders think about building trust in a day and age, particularly when there isn't a lot of trust in public institutions or perhaps in private institutions as well?
I think that's one of the tragedies of our era, is people have lost trust in our institutions, in each other. There's a coarseness that is developed in our dialogue, whereas I think if you build a high trust organization, there's more innovation, you're more flexible, what you're doing is more durable, and it's a whole lot more fun. And I think there are ways that you can build high trust organizations, but it starts with you as the leader. I think you have to be a high trust human being yourself, and that means delivering on promises.
And part of building that trust is really showing yourself as a leader who has empathy and can speak out on issues that don't have to do with the business. And there's a lot of pressure on CEOs these days to do just that. What would you say to leaders who just want to talk about the business and don't necessarily want to acknowledge that there are wider problems happening impacting society?
Well, every business exists within a context, and all customers of these businesses have lives and interests beyond the product or service they're buying from you. So it's only smart to be aware of that. You can connect better with your customers and with your employees if you do that. So you have to be aware.
And you've sat on more than 36 boards over the past 45 years. What are the biggest ways that you're seeing the demands on private sector leaders changing?
Well, I think it is an awareness of society and societal demands. There are many more pressures. There have been a lot more regulations that have come to bear on CEOs. I think those are probably the two biggest ones, is more regulation and more pressures from things other than just shareholders.
And this gets to a question that I'm getting here from the stream. Jasmine Tang wants to know, why do you think the culture in Silicon Valley became so fraught with distrust and toxicity to begin with?
Well, I think it's highly competitive. I think it's a bunch of very smart people who are financed by folks who have short fuses on the financing, and so they become hyper aggressive, and when people are under pressure, they sometimes lose track of their values.
And in terms of losing track of those values, obviously that's a trait of a not great leader. What are the traits that you're seeing in terms of leadership that are driving the best businesses forward? What do the best CEOs have in terms of the way that they lead teams?
So I think they do a couple of things. One is they have clarity around what their goals are. They're able to articulate what winning is. They hire great people And that also means they let people who aren't so great off the bus. So they have to make those changes. So to me, being clear about your goals, building high trust, getting the right team on, then allows you to build a high quality, high trust organization.
Another question from the stream here. Ricky Chen wants to know, how do you actually encourage empathy and teamwork in the workplace instead of just promoting high-performing narcissists that are typically lauded? So how do you actually do this on the ground, day to day?
So I think the main thing a leader can do is be a great listener. You know, you've talked to people who are formulating their next question when you're asking them a question. It's just a constant debate. If you can get good at listening to what people say, at capturing what they're saying, at repeating to them in a more articulate way than they just told you something, people will start to mimic that. Leaders have tremendous influence on the culture. People will tend to mimic what leaders do. So if you want a high trust culture, if you want a culture that isn't cutthroat, you can't behave in a cutthroat way as the CEO.
And Spencer Huang has a question about trust. What do most people not know about trust? Where does trust begin within organizations and consumers?
Well, what most people don't know about it is that it's a hard-edged concept. It really makes a difference. I think people think about trust as this soft, fuzzy thing that's just about feeling. Trust is something that you can factor analyze. You can figure out who to trust, who not to trust. You can repair broken trust, and you can overcome betrayal. So it's a very powerful thing to have in your life. It's a very powerful part of a brand, and you can be intentional about it.
Are there specific brands that you think are nailing trust right now within the private sector?
That are what?
Specific brands within the private sector that are really nailing trust, companies that you think are trustworthy?
Well, I'd have to say JetBlue, wouldn't I?
Yeah. And what's been working within JetBlue to remain trustful with customers and with employees?
Well, we care a lot about our crew members. We pay a lot of attention to our crew members. Everybody's called a crew member. So as chairman, I'm a crew member. Our CEO is a crew member. Everybody's a crew member. And we show them respect. We listen to them. We give them great training. We're all about safety. And people have learned to trust us to deliver a high quality product at a reasonable price.
And you must get advice, ask for advice from leaders all the time who are hiring. What do you tell them in terms of how to look for these traits when they're bringing people into the company?
Well, nothing beats a reference check. So nothing beats a kind of a complete interview that goes from beginning to end. Why did you make each change in your life? And then doing reference checks. And that won't get you all the way there, but it'll get you a long ways there from making a lot of bad hiring mistakes.
Reference checks are key. Joel, your next book hits on the themes of entrepreneurial leadership. What is entrepreneurial leadership? Break it down for us.
Well, if you'll think about the leaders you've known, there are some who are presiders that sit in the corner office and they kiss babies and cut ribbons and they make everything go along smoothly. That's one kind of a leader. And by the way, that's not bad. That can be an important thing that happens. There are other leaders who are innovators. They are lighting fires all the time. That's not a bad thing. We need those kinds of leaders too. But the entrepreneurial leader is the one who can make durable change. So management is about complexity. Leadership is about change. Entrepreneurial leaders are the ones that can create change that is durable, that people want to, and they can institutionalize that change. So the book is really about how do you do that? What do you have to put together? Is there a recipe for that? Can you become an entrepreneurial leader? And my thesis is we can all become entrepreneurial leaders and the world needs more of them.
Well, that's a very great thesis, and I'm sure a lot of people on LinkedIn will be interested in reading that book. Joel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Caroline. Good to be with you.